Hello again. I'll read the final 2 chapters of Danny, Champion of the World. And then, Lockie, I hope you'll be able to read the book all the way through yourself. I hope you've read some of it. But you can always go back to some of my videos and see the bits where perhaps it's a bit difficult to read. I don't know. I imagine you'll be so good you'll be able to read the book all the way through. Anyway, we're now at chapter 21, Doc Spencer's Surprise. Out on the main road, a line of about 20 cars and lorries were parked bumper to bumper, and the people were standing about in groups, laughing and talking about the astonishing sight they had just witnessed. "Come along now," Sergeant Samways called, striding forwards towards them. "Get going, get moving. We can't have this. You're blocking the highway." Nobody ever disobeyed Sergeant Samways, and soon the people were drifting back to their cars and getting in. In a few minutes they too were all gone. Only the 4 of us were left now, Doc Spencer, Sergeant Samways, my father and me. "Well, Willum," Sergeant Samways said, coming back from the road to join us beside the pumps, "them pheasants was the most astonishing sight I've ever seen in my entire life." "It was lovely," Doc Spencer said, "just lovely. Didn't you enjoy it, Danny?" "Marvellous," I said. "Pity we lost them," my father said. "It very near broke my heart when they all started flying out of the pram. I knew we'd lost them then." "But how in heaven's name did you ever catch 'em in the first place?" asked Sergeant Samways. "How did you do it, Willum? Come on, man, let me in on the secret." My father told him. He kept it short, but even then it made a fine story, and all the way through it the sergeant kept saying, "Well, I never, well, I'll be blowed. You could knock me down with a feather. Stone the crows," and things like that. And when the story was finished, he pointed his long policeman's finger straight at my face and cried, "Well, I'll be jiggered. I never would have thought a little nipper like you could come up with such a fantastical brainwave as that. Young man, I congratulate you." "He'll go a long way, young Danny will. You see if he doesn't," Doc Spencer says. "He'll be a great inventor one day." To be spoken about like that by the 2 men I admired most in the world after my father made me blush and stutter, and as I stood there wondering what on earth I was expected to say in reply, a woman's voice behind me cried out, "Well, thank goodness that's over at last." This, of course, was Mrs. Grace Clipstone, who was now picking her way cautiously down the caravan steps with young Christopher in her arms. Never in my life, she was saying, have I seen such a shambles as that. The little white hat was perched on the top of her head, and the prim white gloves were still on her hands. "What a gathering," she said, advancing towards us. "What a gathering we have here of rogues and varmints. Good morning, Enoch." "Good morning to you, Mrs. Clipstone," Sergeant Samways said. "How's the baby?" my father asked her. "The baby is better, thank you, William," she said, "though I doubt he'll ever be quite the same again." "Of course he will," Doc Spencer said. "Babies are tough." "I don't care how tough they are," she answered. "How would you like it if you were being taken for a nice quiet walk in your pram on a pretty autumn morning, and you were sitting on a lovely soft mattress, and suddenly the mattress comes alive and starts bouncing you up and down like a stormy sea, and the next thing you know there's about 100 sharp curvy beaks poking up from underneath the mattress and pecking you to pieces?" The doctor cocked his head to one side and then to the other, and he smiled at Mrs. Clipstone. "You think it's funny?" she cried. "Well, just you wait, Doc Spencer, and one night I'll put a few snakes or crocodiles or something under your mattress and see how you like it." Sergeant Samways was fetching his bicycle from beside the pumps. "Well, ladies and gents," he said, "I must be off and see who else is getting into mischief around here." "I'm truly sorry you were troubled, Enoch," my father said, "and thanks very much indeed for your help." "I wouldn't have missed this one for all the tea and china," Sergeant Samways said. "But it did sadden me most terrible, Willum, to see all those lovely birds go slipping right through our fingers like that, because to my mind there don't exist a more luscious dish than roast pheasant anywhere on this earth." "It's going to sadden the vicar a lot more than it saddens you," says Mrs. Clipstone. "That's all he's been talking about ever since he got out of bed this morning, the lovely roast pheasant he was going to have for his dinner tonight." "He'll get over it," Doc Spencer said. "He will not get over it, and it's a rotten shame," Mrs. Clipstone said, "because now all I've got to give him are some awful frozen fillets of cod, and he never did like cod anyway." "But," my father said, "surely you didn't load all those pheasants into the pram, did you? You were meant to keep at least a dozen for you and the vicar." Oh, I know that, she wailed, but I was so tickled at the thought of strolling calmly through the village with Christopher sitting on 120 birds, I simply forgot to keep any back for ourselves. And now, alas, they're all gone, and so is the vicar's supper. The doctor went over to Mrs. Clipstone and took her by the arm. You come with me, Grace, he said. I've got something to show you. He led her across to my father's workshop, where the big doors stood wide open. The rest of us stayed where we were and waited. Good grief! Come and look at this, Mrs. Clipstone called from inside the workshop. William, Enoch, Danny, come and look. We hurried over and entered the workshop. It was a great sight. Laid out on my father's bench amid the spanners and wrenches and oily rags were 6 magnificent pheasants, 3 cocks and 3 hens. There we are, ladies and gentlemen, said the doctor, his small wrinkling face beaming with delight. How's that? We were speechless. 2 for you, Grace, to keep the vicar in a good mood, Doc Spencer said. 2 for Enoch for all the fine work he did this morning, and 2 for William and Danny, who deserved them most of all. What about you, Doctor? My father asked. That doesn't leave any for you. My wife has enough to do without plucking pheasants all day long, he said. And anyway, who got them out of the wood in the first place? You and Danny. But how on earth did you get them? My father asked him. When did you nab them? I didn't nab them, the doctor said. I had a hunch. What sort of a hunch? My father asked. It seemed fairly obvious, the doctor said, that some of those pheasants must have gobbled up more than 1 raisin each. Some, if they were quick enough, might have swallowed half a dozen each, or even more, in which case they would have received a very heavy overdose of sleeping pills and wouldn't ever wake up. Aha, we cried, of course, of course. So while you were all busy driving the birds onto old Hazel's Rolls-Royce, I sneaked in here and had a look under the sheet at the bottom of the pram, and there they were. Amazing, said Sergeant Samways. Absolutely amazing. Those were the greedy ones, the doctor said. It never pays to eat more than your fair share. Marvellous, my father said. Well done, sir. Oh, you lovely man, cried Mrs. Clipstone, flinging an arm round the tiny doctor and giving him a kiss on the cheek. Now come along, the doctor said to her. I'll drive you home. You can leave this crazy perambulator where it is. And Enoch, we'll take your birds with us and drop them off at your house on the way. We can't have the arm of the law cycling through the village with a brace of pheasants slung over his handlebars. I'm very much obliged to you, Doctor, Sergeant Samway said. I really am. My father and I loaded 4 of the pheasants into the doctor's car. Mrs. Clipstone got into the front seat with the baby, and the doctor sat himself behind the wheel. Don't be sad, William, he said to my father through the window as he drove on. It was a famous victory. Then Sergeant Samways mounted his bicycle and waved us goodbye, and pedalled away down the road in the direction of the village. He pedalled slowly, and there was a certain majesty in the way he held himself, with his head high and his back very straight, as though he were riding a fine, thoroughbred mare instead of an old black bike. And there he goes. And this is the last chapter. Chapter 22, My Father. It was all over now. My father and I stood alone just outside the workshop, and suddenly the old place seemed to become very quiet. Well, Danny, my father said, looking at me with those twinkly eyes of his. That's that. It was fun, Dad. I know it was, he said. I really loved it, I said. So did I, Danny. He placed one hand on my shoulder, and we began walking slowly towards the caravan. Maybe we should lock the pumps and take a holiday for the rest of the day, he said. You mean not open up at all? Why should we, he said. After all, it's Saturday, isn't it? But we always stay open on Saturdays, Dad, and Sundays. Maybe it's time we didn't, he said. We could do something else instead. Something more interesting. I waited, wondering what was coming next. When we reached the caravan, my father climbed the steps and sat down on the little outside platform. He allowed both his legs, the plaster one and the good one, to dangle over the edge. I climbed up and sat down beside him with my feet on the steps of the ladder. It was a fine place to sit, the platform of the caravan. It was such a quiet, comfortable place to sit and talk and do nothing in pleasant weather. People with houses have a front porch or a terrace instead, with big chairs to lounge in. But I wouldn't have traded either of those for our wooden platform. I know a place about 3 miles away, my father was saying, over Copper's Hill and down the other side, where there's a small wood of larch trees. It's a very quiet place, and the stream runs right through it. The stream? I said. He nodded and gave me another of his twinkly looks. It's full of trout, he said. Oh, could we? I cried. Could we go there, Dad? Why not, he said. We could try tickling them the way Doc Spencer told us. Will you teach me? I said. I haven't had much practice with trout, he told me. Pheasants are more my line, but we could always learn. Can we go now? I asked, getting excited all over again. I thought we would just pop into the village first and buy the electric oven, he said. You haven't forgotten about the electric oven, have you? But Dad, I said, that was when we thought we were going to have lots and lots of pheasants to roast. We've still got the 2 the Doc gave us, he said, and with any luck we'll have lots more of them as the weeks go by. It's time we had an oven anyway. Then we can roast things properly instead of heating up baked beans in a saucepan. We could have roasted pork one day, and then if we felt like it, we could have roasted leg of lamb the next time, or even roasted beef. Wouldn't you like that? Yes, I said, of course I would. And Dad, would you be able to make your favourite thing of all? What's that? He asked. Toad in the hole, I cried. By golly, he said, that'll be the very first thing we'll make in our new oven. Toad in the hole. I'll make it in an enormous pan, the same as me old mum, with the Yorkshire pudding very crisp and raised up in huge bubbly mountains, and the sausages nestling in between the mountains. Can we get it today, Dad? Will they deliver it at once? They might, Danny. We'll have to see. Couldn't we order it now on the telephone? We mustn't do that, my father said. We must go personally to see Mr. Wheeler, and we must inspect all the different models with great care. All right, I said, let's go. I was really steamed up now about getting an oven and being able to have toad in the hole and roasted pork and stuff like that. I couldn't wait. My father got to his feet, and when we've done that, he said, we'll go off to the stream and see if we can't find us some rainbow trout. We could take sandwiches with us for lunch and eat them beside the stream. That will make a good day of it. A few minutes later, the 2 of us were walking down the well-known road towards the village to buy the oven. My father's iron foot went clink-clink on the hard surface, and overhead some big black thunderclouds were moving slowly down the valley. Dad, I said. Yes, my love? When we have our roasted pheasant supper with our new oven, do you think we could invite Dr. Spencer and Mrs. Spencer to eat it with us? Great heavens, my father cried. What a wonderful thought. What a beautiful idea. We'll give a dinner party in their honour. The only thing is, I said, will there be enough room in the caravan for 4 people? I think so, he said, just. But we've only got 2 chairs. That's no problem, Danny. You and I can sit on boxes. There was a short silence. Then he said, but I'll tell you what we must have, and that's a tablecloth. We can't serve dinner to the doctor and his wife without a tablecloth. But we don't have a tablecloth, Dad. Don't you worry about it, my father said. We can use a sheet from one of the bunks. That's all a tablecloth is, a sort of sheet. What about knives and forks? I asked. How many do we have? Just 2 knives, I said, and 2 forks, and those are all a bit dented. We shall buy 2 more of each, my father said. We shall give our guests the new ones and use the old ones ourselves. Good, I said. Lovely. I reached out and slid my hand into his. He folded his long fingers around my fist and held it tight, and we walked on towards the village where soon the 2 of us would be inspecting all the different ovens with great care and talking to Mr. Wheeler personally about them. And after that we would walk home again and make up some sandwiches for our lunch. And after that we would set off with the sandwiches in our pockets, striding up over Cobbler's Hill and down the other side to the small wood of larch trees with the stream running through it. And after that, perhaps a big rainbow trout. And after that, there would be something else after that. And after that? Ah, yes, and something else again. Because what I have been trying to tell you so hard all along, is simply that my father, without the slightest doubt, was the most marvellous and exciting father any boy ever had. And that's the end. And there they are, walking together. And I hope you've enjoyed me reading most of the book. And now it's your turn to do some reading of your own. You can try this book, which you obviously have to read for school, but lots of other books I know you read, and I hope you enjoy reading as much as I do. So goodbye for now, and the next lot I do, I'll do one for Merrin. Bye for now. Bye.